The Zenithian Empire had perfected the art of cosmic voyeurism to a degree that would make even the most dedicated gossip columnist weep with envy. Across 17,000 star systems, their surveillance network hummed with the quiet efficiency of a civilization that had long ago decided the universe was their personal reality show, and everyone else were merely the unwitting participants. From their crystalline observation posts, scattered like expensive jewelry across the galactic arm, Zenithian analysts monitored every species that had managed to crawl out of their primordial soup and discover fire without immediately setting their entire planet ablaze. It was exhausting work, really, keeping track of all these developing civilizations and their adorably primitive attempts at interstellar relevance. The Zenithians approached this task with the same weary resignation of parents watching their toddlers play with blocks, occasionally intervening when someone was about to stick a fork in a light socket, but mostly just taking notes for later amusement. The technology behind this galactic surveillance network was naturally several orders of magnitude beyond what most species could comprehend. Quantum-entangled sensor arrays that could detect a sneeze from 3-star systems away, temporal observation matrices that could peer backward and forward through time like flipping through a particularly boring photo album, stealth field generators, so advanced they made light itself forget where it was supposed to go. The Zenithians had essentially weaponized the concept of being nosy neighbors, and they wore this achievement like a badge of honor. Command Central, the beating heart of this operation, resembled what might happen if someone gave a particularly ambitious interior decorator unlimited resources and a mild obsession with glowing things. Holographic displays floated in perfect geometric arrangements, each one monitoring a different corner of galactic civilization. Zenithian operators, tall and graceful with skin that shifted through subtle shades of blue depending on their mood, glided between stations with the practiced boredom of beings who had seen every possible variation of planetary drama at least 17 times. It was on a Tuesday, or what passed for Tuesday in a civilization that had long ago decided traditional temporal measurements were for species that still counted on their fingers, that junior analyst HFY made the discovery that would in retrospect prove that even the most advanced civilizations could occasionally stick their collective foot in their collective mouth with spectacular precision. "Supervisor," HFY called out, his skin shifting to a pleased amber that suggested either professional satisfaction or mild indigestion. "We have a new candidate for Level 3 monitoring protocols." Senior Supervisor Zenithian drifted over with the measured pace of someone who had processed enough urgent discoveries to know that most of them involved either a species discovering agriculture or figuring out that hitting things with sticks was more effective than hitting things with other things. Her skin maintained the steady violet of bureaucratic patience. "Classific?" she inquired, already mentally preparing the standard forms. "Carbon-based bipeds, third planet of a G-type star system. Outer Rim Sector 7 Alpha 9. They've achieved basic orbital capability and appear to be launching rudimentary satellites." HFY gestured to his display where Earth rotated in all its blue-green glory, completely unaware that it had just become the subject of galactic interest. Zenithian's skin flickered to a slightly brighter violet, the Zenithian equivalent of raising an eyebrow. "Technological assessment. Primitive but progressing. They're using chemical propulsion, which is quaint. Their satellites are roughly equivalent to what the Deltacans were launching about 3,000 years ago, but they seem enthusiastic about it. Lots of little metal objects going up on controlled explosion." HFY's tone carried the affectionate condescension typically reserved for watching pets learn new tricks. "Social structure, fragmented, multiple competing nation-states, various ideological conflicts, the usual planetary adolescence symptoms. They call themselves humans, though why they chose a name that sounds like a respiratory condition is beyond comprehension." Zenithian nodded, her skin settling into the steady bureaucratic violet of someone about to make a decision that seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. "Standard monitoring protocol it is. Establish observation posts at the edge of their detection capabilities, maintain passive surveillance, log all significant technological developments. Given their current trajectory, we should have a complete behavioral profile within a few decades." "Shall I prepare contact protocols?" HFY asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Absolutely not. They're nowhere near ready for galactic integration. Look at them. They're still figuring out how to get their little rockets to go straight up without exploding. Give them another 1,000 years or so to mature past the hitting things with increasingly sophisticated sticks phase of development. The irony, of course, was completely lost on them. Here was a species so advanced they could monitor quantum fluctuations in distant galaxies, yet they were making their assessments based on the assumption that anyone using chemical rockets must be essentially lobotomized. It was the kind of cosmic misunderstanding that would have been hilarious if it weren't about to become profoundly embarrassing. Within 48 hours, 3 Class 7 stealth observation platforms had been positioned at strategic points around Earth's solar system, their presence as undetectable as a shadow in a black hole. The humans continued their charming little space program, launching satellites and occasionally sending brave volunteers to orbit their planet in what appeared to be modified tin cans. The Zenithians watched, catalogued, and filed reports with the satisfied efficiency of a civilization convinced they had the universe figured out. After all, what could possibly go wrong with monitoring a species that was still impressed by getting metal objects to circle their own planet? As it turned out, quite a lot. 6 months into what the Zenithians had cheerfully classified as Project Backwater babysitting, the first signs appeared that perhaps their assessment of human intelligence had been about as accurate as a blindfolded mathematician attempting calculus. Unfortunately for the Zenithians, they possessed that particular brand of intellectual arrogance that treats contradictory evidence like an unwelcome dinner guest, acknowledged briefly, then politely ignored until it goes away. Junior analyst HFY had developed what his colleagues diplomatically termed an unhealthy obsession with the human monitoring data. In reality, he was simply the first to notice that the supposedly primitive carbon-based bipeds were displaying behavioral patterns that made about as much sense as a fish riding a bicycle through a thunderstorm. Supervisor Zenithians, he called out during the morning briefing, his skin cycling through an agitated spectrum of colors that suggested either deep concern or a severe allergic reaction to the recycled station air. The humans are doing it again. Doing what again? Zenithians replied with the weary patience of someone who had fielded 17 similar concerns in the past week, each involving humans allegedly doing something that defied conventional xenobiological expectations. Looking directly at observation post Gamma, HFY gestured to his holographic display, where Earth's latest satellite launch was playing in slow motion. Watch the trajectory adjustment at Mach 4. That satellite just performed a completely unnecessary orbital correction that puts it in perfect visual range of our stealth platform. Zenithians examined the data with the thoroughness of a being whose career advancement depended on not missing obvious detail. The satellite in question, a clunky metal contraption that looked like it had been assembled by particularly ambitious scrap dealers, had indeed performed a maneuver that served no apparent scientific purpose, except to point several high-resolution cameras directly at empty space. Coincidentally, their observation post happened to be lurking. Coincidence, she declared with the confident dismissiveness of someone who had built their entire worldview on the assumption that primitives remain primitive until proven otherwise. They're probably conducting some sort of deep space survey. These species often waste enormous amounts of resources looking for things they'll never find. HFY's skin shifted to a skeptical orange. That's the 7th coincidence this month. 3 of their space missions have performed similar unnecessary maneuvers, all targeting areas within our operational perimeter. Their latest orbital platform is equipped with sensor arrays that shouldn't exist according to our technological assessment. Shouldn't exist according to our initial assessment, Zenithians corrected, though her voice carried the first hints of uncertainty. Perhaps we underestimated their developmental timeline. Species sometimes make surprising leaps forward. Look at the Corellians. They went from bronze tools to quantum computing in just 3 centuries. What neither Zenithian mentioned, because neither had quite processed the implications, was that human technological advancement appeared to be accelerating at a rate that made their carefully calculated development projections look like the mathematical equivalent of finger painting. In the 6 months since monitoring began, humans had launched more sophisticated equipment than their models predicted they would develop in the next 50 years. The situation became significantly more interesting when Observation Post Beta 12 reported what could only be described as aggressive curiosity from the human. A deep space probe, officially designated as an asteroid survey mission by human space agencies, had spent 3 weeks conducting what appeared to be systematic sweeps of the exact region where Beta 12 maintained its position. They're scanning with focused gravitational wave detectors, reported field operator Zenithians. his usually steady purple complexion flickering with confusion. The resolution shouldn't be sufficient to detect our stealth fields, but they're certainly trying hard enough to make me nervous? Zenithana's skin shifted to a pale blue that suggested either amusement or the onset of a migraine. They're using primitive sensors to look for something they don't know exists. It's like watching children play hide and seek with their eyes closed. Children who somehow keep looking in exactly the right direction, HFY muttered, his color cycling through increasingly agitated hues. The breaking point came when humans launched what they proudly announced as their most advanced deep space communications array. A designation would have been laughable if the device hadn't immediately begun transmitting highly focused signals directly at each of the 3 Zenithian observation posts in sequence, like someone knocking on doors to see if anyone was home. The transmissions themselves were ostensibly scientific, radio telescope calibration signals, according to human documentation, but the timing, frequency, and targeting precision suggested either the most remarkable series of coincidences in galactic history, or humans who possessed a significantly better understanding of their local space environment than anyone had given them credit for. Sir, HFY announced during what had become daily emergency briefings, they're now conducting routine spacewalks that involve pointing handheld instruments directly at our position. Yesterday, one of their astronauts spent 47 minutes apparently admiring empty space that contains observation post Alpha 3. Zenithana stared at the accumulated data with the expression of someone slowly realizing that their carefully ordered universe had developed a sense of humor at their expense. 17 separate incidents of humans displaying uncanny awareness of Zenithian surveillance position. Technological developments that consistently exceeded projected timelines. Space missions that made perfect sense only if you assumed the humans knew exactly what they were looking for. Analysis suggests 3 possibilities, she announced, her skin settling into the pale gray of deep bureaucratic concern. First, we're witnessing the most statistically improbable series of coincidences in recorded galactic history. Second, human development has undergone an unprecedented acceleration that invalidates all our xenobiological models. Third, she paused, her skin flickering through colors that suggested thoughts too uncomfortable to voice. Third, HFY prompt. Third, our monitoring protocols may have been compromised, and the subjects of our surveillance are aware of our presence. The phrase hung in the recycled air of Command Central like a particularly unwelcome revelation, while around them dozens of other monitoring stations continued their observations of species that had the basic courtesy to remain properly primitive and unaware. Unfortunately for Zenithian peace of mind, the truth was about to prove significantly more unsettling than simple surveillance compromise. The moment when a civilization realizes it has been magnificently, spectacularly wrong about something fundamental, is rarely accompanied by fanfare or dramatic music. More often it arrives with the quiet persistence of water finding cracks in what was supposed to be a perfectly sealed foundation. For the Zenithians, this moment came disguised as a routine sensor malfunction report that would have been hilarious if it hadn't been absolutely terrifying. Observation post Alpha 3 is offline, Field Operator Venthluck announced with the careful neutrality of someone delivering news that might result in either mild inconvenience or career-ending catastrophe. Complete systems failure across all monitoring arrays. Senior Supervisor Zenithana felt her skin shift to the pale yellow of impending bureaucratic disaster. Equipment malfunction, that's what we assumed initially. Standard diagnostic protocols showed nothing unusual until Venthluck paused, his coloration cycling through the spectrum of someone wrestling with information that refused to make sense. Until we detected the human maintenance vessel. The words settled over Command Central like a particularly unwelcome guest, who had just announced their intention to stay permanently. Around the chamber, other operators paused in their monitoring duties, their skin colors shifting to various shades of confused attention. Maintenance vessel. Zenithana's voice carried the carefully controlled tone of someone who suspected they were about to hear something that would ruin their entire day. A human spacecraft, officially designated as a deep space repair platform, positioned approximately 50 meters from our stealth platform. They appear to be performing maintenance operations on our external sensor arrays. The silence that followed this announcement was the kind of profound quiet that occurs when an entire room full of highly intelligent beings
simultaneously realizes they may not be as intelligent as previously advertised. It was broken only by the soft humming of life support systems and the distant sound of junior analyst Kethvar's workstation chiming with incoming priority alerts. "Sir," Kethvar called out, his skin now cycling through colors that suggested either extreme stress or a particularly vivid psychotic episode. Observation post Beta 12 reports similar circumstances. Human research vessel conducting scientific observations of their position. Gamma 7 has gone completely dark, but long-range sensors detect human activity at their coordinates. Zenithians stared at the holographic displays with the expression of someone watching their carefully constructed understanding of reality collapse in real time. 3 observation posts, supposedly invisible to primitive human senses, now apparently serving as convenient parking spaces for human spacecraft. The stealth technology that had successfully hidden Zenithian operations from 17,000 different species across the galaxy was being casually ignored by beings who supposedly still thought chemical rockets were impressive. "Emergency protocols," she announced, her skin settling into the decisive purple of someone who had decided that if reality was going to become incomprehensible, she would at least maintain proper administrative procedures. "Recall all field platforms immediately. Initiate full spectrum analysis of human technological capabilities." And someone explained to me how a species that was launching tin cans 6 months ago is now performing maintenance on equipment they shouldn't be able to detect. The explanation, when it came, arrived in the form of a data packet transmitted directly to Command Central from an unknown source. The transmission bypassed every security protocol the Zenithians had developed over millennia of galactic surveillance, slipped through their defensive networks like water through a sieve, and appeared on Zenithian's personal workstation with a message header that read, in perfectly translated Zenithian script, "We should probably." The attached data files contained information that transformed the previous months of mysterious human behavior from inexplicable coincidences into a masterclass in strategic deception. Detailed schematics of Zenithian stealth technology, complete operational profiles of all 3 observation posts, communication logs between Zenithian persons. Most disturbingly, comprehensive behavioral analyses of individual Zenithian operators, including personal habits, duty schedules, and psychological profiles that demonstrated an understanding of Zenithian culture that should have required decades of direct observation to acquire. "They've been watching us watch them," Kethvar announced, with the stunned revelation of someone discovering that the mouse they'd been studying had actually been taking notes on the researchers. "This entire time they've known exactly where we were, what we were doing, and apparently what we were thinking while we did it." The final piece of the data package was a politely worded invitation for meaningful diplomatic dialogue between our respective species, along with coordinates for a meeting location and a suggested timeframe that indicated humans had been planning this revelation for considerably longer than the Zenithians had been conducting surveillance. Zenithians reviewed the accumulated evidence with the growing horror of someone realizing they had been playing poker against opponents who could see their cards, knew their tells, and had been counting the deck since before the game began. Every coincidental human space mission, every lucky guess about Zenithian positions, every technological advancement that exceeded their projections, all of it had been carefully orchestrated theater designed to gradually introduce the Zenithians to a reality they were apparently unprepared to accept. "Technological assessment revision," she announced to her staff, her skin cycling through colors that suggested a complete reorganization of previously held certainties. "Humans are not a developing species, they are not primitive, they are not unaware of galactic civilization." She paused, staring at the holographic display where Earth continued its peaceful rotation, now looking considerably less like a quaint backwater planet, and considerably more like the home of a species that had just demonstrated they could run circles around one of the galaxy's most advanced surveillance networks. "They have been evaluating us," she continued, "while we believed we were evaluating them. The question now is, what else do they know that we haven't figured out yet?" The answer to that question was about to prove considerably more extensive than any Zenithian was prepared to contemplate. As it turned out, humans had not spent the past several decades simply becoming aware of alien surveillance. They had been busy conducting reconnaissance operations that would make even the most paranoid intelligence agency weep with professional admiration. The universe, it seemed, was about to become a significantly more interesting place. The human delegation arrived at the designated coordinates, with the kind of casual punctuality that suggested they had been planning this meeting since before the Zenithians had figured out there was going to be a meeting at all. Their vessel, a sleek construction that bore absolutely resemblance to the primitive chemical propulsion devices the Zenithians had been smugly cataloging, materialized from what appeared to be empty space, with technology that made Zenithian stealth systems look like children playing peekaboo with bedsheets. Senior Supervisor Zenith, now bearing the dubious distinction of being the first Zenithian in recorded history to have her surveillance operation completely reversed by the subjects under observation, watched the human ship's approach with the resigned fascination of someone witnessing their own professional obituary being written in real time. The human representative, who stepped aboard the Zenithian diplomatic vessel, was unremarkable in the way that truly dangerous individuals often are. Average height, pleasant expression, and the kind of calm demeanor that suggested either complete confidence or a comprehensive understanding of exactly how much trouble everyone else was in. She introduced herself with a name that Zenithians immediately forgot, partly due to the stress of the situation, and partly because her attention was focused on the small device the human was casually consulting. Interesting ship design, the human commented, glancing around the Zenithian vessel's interior with the appreciative eye of someone examining a museum exhibit. We've been wondering about your gravitational stabilization systems for years. Very elegant solution to the quantum resonance problem. Zenithians felt her skin cycle through several colors that roughly translated to bureaucratic panic. You've been studying our technology. Studying might be too strong a word, the human replied with a smile that suggested she found the question charmingly naive. Observing would be more accurate. We've had monitoring stations positioned throughout this sector for the past 47 years, keeping track of various species and their technological developments. Your people have been particularly interesting subject. The revelation hit Command Central like a small but precisely targeted diplomatic nuclear weapon. 47 years of human surveillance operations that had completely escaped Zenithian detection. Monitoring stations that had observed the observers while remaining utterly invisible to sensors that could detect quantum fluctuations from distant galaxies. That's impossible, Zenithians protested with the desperate conviction of someone clinging to the wreckage of everything they thought they knew. Our sensor networks would have detected any monitoring infrastructure. We've mapped every artificial object in this sector down to the molecular level. The human's smile widened with the kind of gentle amusement typically reserved for explaining basic concepts to particularly slow children. You mapped every object you were technologically capable of detecting. Our installations operate on principles your current scientific models don't account for. Though I should mention your quantum entanglement communication system is quite impressive. We've learned several useful techniques from monitoring your transmissions over the years. Junior analyst HFY, who had spent months documenting inexplicable human behavior, now realized he had been documenting carefully orchestrated performance art designed to gradually introduce the Zenithians to concepts they were apparently too advanced to grasp. His skin cycled through colors that suggested either deep philosophical revelation or a complete nervous breakdown. The satellite launches, he said slowly. The space missions that targeted our observation posts, the technological developments that exceeded our projections. Theater, the human confirmed cheerfully. We needed to bring you to the realization gradually. Direct revelation tends to cause psychological trauma in species that have built their identity around technological superiority. We've learned that lesson from previous first contact scenarios. Zenithians' voice carried the hollow tone of someone discovering that their entire civilization had been cosmic tourists, visiting destinations that were already thoroughly mapped by beings they had dismissed as primitive. The human consulted her device again, scrolling through what appeared to be an extensive list. Oh yes, we've been in contact with 14 different species in this galactic arm. The Deltacans were particularly surprised to learn we'd been monitoring their development for over a century. The Corellians took it much better, though they did ask if we could share our improved quantum computing designs. She paused, looking up from her device with an expression of mild curiosity. Speaking of which, would you be interested in seeing our deep space monitoring network? It's quite extensive, and we think you might find the sensor technology fascinating. We've been tracking civilizations across several galactic clusters, and some of our long-range observation data goes back nearly 3 centuries. The silence that followed this casual mention of a monitoring network that apparently spanned significant portions of the known galaxy was broken only by the soft sound of Zenithian worldviews collapsing like poorly constructed buildings in an earthquake. 3 centuries, Zenithian man, give or take a few decades. We started with local stellar observations and expanded outward as our technology improved. You wouldn't believe how many supposedly advanced civilizations assume they're the only ones conducting surveillance operations. It's actually quite common technological species tend to develop a monitoring complex around the same time they achieve interstellar capability. The human gestured toward the view screen, where Earth hung in space looking exactly as harmless and primitive as it had when the Zenithians first discovered it. The irony is that most species spend so much time looking outward for signs of intelligence that they completely miss the intelligence that's already looking back at them. You've been cataloging our development for months, while we've been cataloging your cataloging techniques for decades. She smiled with the patient amusement of a teacher watching students finally grasp a particularly challenging concept. The universe is much more crowded than most civilizations realize, and much less primitive than the advanced species assume. The difference between watching and being watched often comes down to which side remembers to check if anyone else is paying attention. As the human representative departed, leaving behind detailed technical specifications for establishing formal diplomatic communications, and what appeared to be several centuries' worth of intelligence reports on galactic civilization, Zenithian sat in her command chair contemplating the fundamental revision of reality that had just occurred. Somewhere in the galaxy, 17,000 other species were conducting their daily activities under the watchful eyes of Zenithian surveillance networks, blissfully unaware that they were being observed. And somewhere else in the galaxy, humans were watching the watchers with the patient amusement of a species that had turned cosmic voyeurism into a fine art. The universe, it seemed, was considerably more recursive than anyone had planned for. The only question now was who was watching the watchers who were watching the watchers, and whether anyone was keeping track of the whole ridiculous situation. As it turned out they were, but that was a revelation for another day entirely.